How is everybody feeling? All right, so you can't use the word great or good. Who's got a better word than that? Awesome that's pretty intense. Content, joyful, excited, inspired, curious. Not bad. No one's tired, bored, stressed, overwhelmed. I'm the only one, I guess. No, I'm not bored, but I am tired. This is, I'm an introvert, and so going to conferences like this is actually super draining for me. Like I sort of like, I love people, but I don't like to talk to them. Just kidding. Anyhow, so today I have to say it's a little tougher for me because I'm, pushing myself to not do what I typically do. And so when I spoke to Mo about this event, we launched a new survey. And this is aligned with the work that I'm doing, in my center right now, which is we're doubling down on the concept of well-being. What is it? How do you define it? Is it helpful to focus on that in environments? And then we'll make those connections to leadership, to job satisfaction, to burnout, et cetera, today. And many of you may have participated in the survey that Mo put out. And thank you for doing that if you did. If you don't, you should feel bad about yourself. But we will get it out to you because you can still do it. It takes 15 minutes or so. Okay, so just take a look at these data. This is brand new from the American Psychological Association about kind of the status of worker or employee well-being. 67% report experience at least one symptom of workplace burnout. 59% said their employer thinks their work environment is a lot mentally healthier than it actually is. And the list goes on. And so when you look at just the overarching data, it makes you wonder, what's going on and how can we unpack this better? I think there are kind of a lot of reasons why we should make well-being a priority. One is, I think, just like the presentation yesterday said there was how many, like 30,000 books on mindfulness, right? There's probably 300,000 books on happiness. And I don't know about all of you, but when I wake up in the morning, I think, what am I going to do to be happy today? I immediately get clinically depressed. Because it's difficult, right? Like that goal of happy, however we may define it, I think is quite challenging. And there is good research, by the way, some of which I've done myself, which shows that the more effort, the more that we value being happy, the more disappointed we get, the more unhappy we get over time, because you're trying to experience an affective state that is not meant to be maintained. It's a good friend of mine. His name is Decker Keltner. You may know his work. He studies awe. And I've had this conversation. He's like, we have to have more awe. I'm like, but Decker, you can't feel awe all the time. Otherwise, that's not awe. Does that make sense? It's just not something that, like, if you're in awe all day long, it's like you can't, what are you going to do? Like, a little, you get some bad news. It's like, it's okay to be disappointed. Anyway, that's a joke between us that now I made public without permission. Anyhow, I think there are many reasons why we could take well-being seriously, right? Obviously, supporting yourself, fostering an engaging workplace, the list goes on. But I really think it's nice. Today, by the way, is not going to be me lecturing the whole time. It's going to be very back and forth. And so I want to take just 1 minute. I know that some of you like these partner shares, some of you don't, but we're going to do it anyway. Just get your minds going on this concept. When you think of the word well-being, what's your operational definition for yourself or for your workplace? Okay, so what are your thoughts?
I was just listening. My thoughts for myself or what I heard?
Anything. You can share someone else's thoughts.
Well, I'll share mine since I didn't. I was thinking peace, contentment, calmness.
Okay.
Like a sense of like de-triggered.
Okay. So kind of a relaxed nervous system, content, tranquil. present. Thank you. Other perceptions? Yes.
Well-being is a sense of sustainable and reliable joy that stays with you, with the various dimensions of physiological, social, spiritual, even financial well-being. Coming together in a wholeness of being.
Nice. So it's a more comprehensive, there's spirituality to it, there is this maintenance of joy. Okay.
I looked at the words, and the word being comes out, so it's not something that we're doing, it's a way, it's a state of being. And then I looked at the word well, which relates to wholeness, and also to health. So there's an integrity in it, and it doesn't involve that much outward action.
Nice. Thank you. Right there.
Being able to navigate your way through life.
Be able to just navigate your way through life. So kind of a practical application. Any other conceptions? Yes, back there.
More tangible than wellness.
More tangible than wellness. Okay. Last one.
I just thought of a dose of optimism.
A dose of optimism, but just a dose. Because God knows it's not so optimistic out there. Okay. Lots of ideas here. Now, I'm not going to be the person who tells you what well-being is. What I'm going to do is share with you what like 100 years of research kind of pulls together. And but before I go there, I want to tell you why our center focuses on this. So in our research over the last, 5 or 10 years, we've surveyed tens of thousands of people about how they feel at work. But also we ask another question, which is, how do you want to feel? In psychology research, we call that your ideal affect, your hoped for affective states. So here's how people feel. There is a little bit of happiness, but it's a lot of frustration. And that has remained consistent in almost every study that I've run. And I've run, 50 studies in the last couple of years. Frustration appears to be the number one emotion, coupled with stressed, overwhelmed, happy. But when we ask people how they want to feel, right, nobody says, tired, bored, stressed, overwhelmed. They say, I want to be happy. I want to feel appreciated. I want to have joy. I want to feel supported. I want to feel fulfilled and excited. So I think from my perspective, one of the things that we have to figure out is this balance of emotion. We're not going to never feel those emotions on the left. Life is filled with frustration, with overwhelm, with disappointment, with anger, with sadness. Like, it is what it is. People get sick. We lose our jobs. We lose our relationships. Life happens. At the same time, if we're all day long thinking, why am I not happy? I want to, you need to appreciate me more. I need more excitement. You're going to go nuts because it's not going to happen. So researchers have spent a long time wondering about this balance, right, of what we might call negative and positive affect. I don't like those terms because I don't like the word negative for emotions, but it's what the field calls it. So let's think about it for a minute. How do we close the gap or bridge the gap or balance? What do we need to do that? Well, now I'm going to give you the longer stuff. So the first area, we'll call it emotional well-being. This is my only very dense slide. Well, I lied about that, but it's going to be, I don't normally put a lot of text, but so when you're thinking about emotional well-being, this is more like the psychological experience of feeling excited and satisfied in other positive emotions compared to feeling anxious, depressed, and other so-called negative emotions. It's kind of this balance, in daily life of, do I feel in general joyful, or do I feel in general kind of down, disappointed, hopeless? But then there are other kinds of emotions. There are what we call social emotions. The feeling of being connected or isolated or appreciated or alienated. So this is the extent to one's social connections and social inclusion with others matters. And then finally, something that I think is challenging right now, especially in my work in schools, is the technical term is eudaimonic. We'll call it workplace or purpose and meaning. the sense of like I matter, the sense that I have a clarity around what I'm interested in. I'm motivated when I wake up in the morning to do the work that I do. And what I find in my work in schools in particular is around 75% of high school students don't have that sense of purpose and meaning. They don't know why they're there. They don't feel like learning is relevant and meaningful to their goals and their kind of lives. And I keep on asking, people in high places in education, like, why are we not thinking about this? Why are we worrying about their math scores, their test scores, when they're sitting there thinking like, what is this? Why am I here? Like, this is not relevant or meaningful to the things that I'm interested in now, or that that will help me achieve my goals in life. Granted, you have to learn shit that you don't want to learn, but at the same time, it could be a greater balance there too. So we're going to focus on these three components today. Now, I'm putting this together in a model. This summer, I ran an institute for 90 educational leaders. That's where I mostly work, is with superintendents and principals of schools. And we came together for a couple of days to really unpack this within their large organization. So, for example, one of the leaders that was there is responsible for, 500,000 children, and tens of thousands of educators. So thinking about that system. And so the focus was on emotional well-being or employee well-being. So in the green box in the middle, does this work? Yeah. We're going to call this, like, if you're a leader, these are the people that are in your environment. And we're concerned about, like, do we know what their emotional well-being is? Do we know what their social well-being is? Do they know what their workplace or eudaimonic well-being is? And we have a goal here, which is what we're finding in our work, is that we want greater retention. We want people with greater physical and mental health. We want more engagement. We want greater performance. It's kind of what every workplace thinks about. And then, as you can see here, we've thought about, all right, so what are the factors that contribute to this? The first is the leader themselves, right? Think about it. So most of you in our survey, which I'm going to show you in a moment, reported that you were in management or leadership positions. I think it was 80% of you said you had people reporting to you in your organizations. So the question is, what are your skills? So, what are your mindsets around this? What is your well-being, your own well-being? What are your skills around emotional intelligence? The second is the organizational level, meaning, like, what's happening in your organization? Are people learning? Are they developing the skills? Are you focusing on that? And the third you might call policies and practices, which, for example, how much do you think about this in hiring? How much do you think about this when you're giving people feedback? Kind of like the organizational practices that either enhance or derail us from having well-being. We can't focus on all of them. So what we're going to focus on today is the measurement piece, meaning we've been working on a new measurement tool, and I want to share with you what we've learned. So here are all of you. We had 239 people participate. Don't need to go through all the details, but it looks like there is a greater balance of gender in the room, but more women did our survey. So, guys, read your emails. It was about 74% white, 6.5% Asian, 6.5% Black or African American, etc. Education, a lot of pretty highly educated, makes sense. And pretty people here make good money. So that's not bad. I'm a little envious of all of you. Occupation-wise, very diverse. So we have one person in construction and manufacturing, but a lot of people, for some reason, in education research, and in the other category. But broadly speaking, a wide range of professions. So let me share with you how this scale has been developed. It's been in progress for many years. I have always been a believer that you have to go into the real world, not just think like a researcher. I like to think like a scientist, but I like to act like an everyday kind of person in the real world. And so you have these scales that researchers build because they sit in their ivory towers and they just write up ideas. Like, ask this, I'm going to ask this, I'm going to ask this, and I'm going to ask this. And that is very true in the emotions research also. Some of the questions that some people ask, I just think like, does anybody even know what that even means? Like, it's just so not rooted in reality. So in my research, what we did was tens of thousands of people reported on surveys, and we just asked them in their own words to describe what are the feelings that you have each day at work? What are the feelings that you want to feel each day at work? And we collected thousands and thousands and thousands of these concepts. Ended up being, hundreds of words, obviously, because there's a lot of vocabulary. And through a variety of mechanisms and through a lot of analyses, we were able to reduce that to about 130, and then with further analysis to 48. And so there are 48 words that you were all asked to report on. And through other rigorous analyses, we were able to reduce those 48 words to what we'll call 16 factors, 16 scales, each in a cluster of 3. And so I'll get into this in about a minute. So let's talk about emotional well-being. Emotional well-being is broken up into both pleasant and unpleasant experiences, broadly speaking. And essentially, the joy factor is asking you on a scale, how much joy have you felt? But not just joy, it's how much joy, how much excitement, how much enthusiasm. Contentment is contentment, satisfaction, fulfilled, hopeful, optimistic, wishful. And then the unpleasant emotions are their anger family, the anxiety family, and the sadness family. So just to give you the understanding of how this works, is that through a technique called factor analysis, you basically look at which items fall together in different families. And essentially, if you look at, there's 6 times 3 is 18, right? Am I right there? Yeah, 6 times 3 is 18. Thank you. But we broke that down to 6, meaning that you have 6 scores for the emotional well-being domain. And so this is yours. So you got to take a look at this, everybody, because these are all of your data analyzed. On a 5-point scale, you were asked to think about how much joy, contentment, and hope you feel versus anger, anxiety, and sadness. And so if you just look at the core data, it doesn't look so bad, right? There are more pleasant, you are experiencing, a greater number of pleasant emotions and a lesser amount of unpleasant emotions. But let's not just be so simplistic about this. I'm going to ask you now to go back to the person you were speaking with now that you're looking at this. And if this were your company, which it could be, because that's the way we do it, when we do this research, we bring it to an organization. We ask the hundreds of people to fill out the surveys. Depending on the demographic nature of the organization, we break it down by race and gender and other factors. I didn't do that here because the sample is not that large, but you could do that to look at bar graphs. That that's where the interesting stuff comes up. But for now, we're going to keep everybody together. You get this data. What does it make you think about in terms of supporting the people in your workplace, if anything? 1 minute, go to work. So, Kristen, what's on your mind?
Well, our group was saying that it makes sense how this would be true of this group because a lot of the people in this room really love what they do and they're passionate about it.
Yep. You're all the chosen ones, right?
That's what I'm trying to say. But if I were to look at my organization and same with the people in my group, like the unpleasant emotions would probably be significant.
Uh-huh. So you think this wouldn't represent, you think this is like more like an ideal scenario here? This isn't, yeah, you think the data would look different in your organization?
Yes.
Okay. But I know that's good. I'm asking you, if you're the leader and you get this, I send you this report, what does this make you think about in terms of supporting your own team? Are you just being like, we're pretty good here, we're not going to do anything? Or does it make you wonder about anything? What does it make you wonder about? Yes?
I want to know specific examples of what are the good things
Yeah.
and what are the things that you don't want, and break it down.
The behaviors, the underlying reasons for it. Okay? So that would be interesting. Yeah.
I might be suspicious that people are not just gaming the survey. Like, oh, this is what the boss wants to hear. That
Yeah.
Good, I'm going to check that box.
Yeah. So you might wonder if there's social desirability, which we check for, by the way. So you can do checks for that kind of stuff. But good point. Yeah.
We talked about the idea that perhaps we wanted them both level to acknowledge that people were having both negative and positive or pleasant and unpleasant because those are natural to have.
They are. I don't think I would agree that we want equal. Like 50% of the day you're angry and 50%. Like, I'll take 10, 15% anger a day. Like, I got enough anger in my workplace. I'll give you my interpretation just now because I want to be able to move on. Is I think this is too low. I wouldn't want people to have a little bit. I don't want people to be having average levels of joy. That feels not so good to me. So I would push for a little bit more. Because remember, it's a 5-point scale. So 3 is smack in the middle. That means it's people are just sort of like moderately or kind of low joy. I would want my people to be having a little bit more joy. That's my big thing. Now, we'll come back to this because we're going to get more granular, just so you know. Now, the next one was the social well-being piece. So this is all of the emotions that are around relationships. So do you feel included? Do you feel accepted at your workplace? Do you have gratitude and appreciation? Do you feel compassion and empathy and sympathy? Are you not feeling isolated, excluded, or ashamed, embarrassed, humiliated? So let's see what that looks like. Again, greater number of pleasant to unpleasant. Maybe that's a bias because of this group. But I'm going to ask you to now take a minute, turn to the people in your area or next to you, and what does this make you think about? Go ahead. What do we think? Any insights from this? Anything that, this is my organization, this is, I run a company, these are my hundreds of employees. Looks good to you?
Well, I think the inclusion piece is a little concerning.
The inclusion piece, you'd like that to be a little higher?
I'd like people to feel included more most of the time.
Yeah. So maybe there's something to understand there about that feeling of inclusion. Yeah.
The loneliness scale on the right, even though it is a little of the time, I'm a chief people officer.
Yeah.
My career has been looking at data like this. And you think about the COVID overhang.
Yeah.
Work from home that people say they love, but creates a huge amount of separation and disconnection. I also would advance this idea that because it's us, the normal population, I don't believe, or standard, would have 18.2% of PhDs.
Yeah.
So we're way educated, making more money,
Yeah.
having a situation making ends meet. I don't believe this is representative of our workplaces, to be honest.
Oh, it's not, I'm not saying it is. This is strictly representative of all of you.
So loneliness would be a true concern for me. Shame was, I had a visceral reaction when I saw the word shame defined.
Yeah.
As a measure, and then when I saw it, I said, how sad. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If there's any shame. Yeah, but thank God it's very low. But it's...
Yes, but still.
Yeah, in no way am I saying these are representative data. This is intentionally you, because I thought it would be interesting. You're coming to this conference, you fill out the survey, let me give you back who you are. All of you shameful, lonely people. And I mean, you're making a good point, though, going back to the data, which is that if this is kind of like the cream of the crop, which I'm assuming all of you think of yourselves as the cream of the crop, then you can imagine what it might be like in some organizations. So next is the purpose and meaning scales. So this is about inspiration and feeling determined and motivated and focused and having pride and feeling like you're successful, as opposed to feeling bored and disconnected, disengaged, burnt out, tired, and exhausted. So let's look here. All right, this one I think might be the most interesting of all. So take a moment with your neighbor and what do you think about this? So what do we think? What does this bring up for you? Exhaustion. Rich?
Not surprised by the exhaustion because, this burnout is, sort of pervasive. I'm surprised inspiration is so low considering this group. it's more like determination. We're gritting it out versus inspired.
Yeah.
So that's curious.
Of course, if we did the survey after the conference, it would be skyrocketing. That would be a great study, right? There's your intervention. Yes.
I'm surprised that previous slide, the positive scores were higher than this.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand the distinction between purpose and the social, and how we're viewing it as a group, as a community.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It's again, the on the social well-being scales, there's a term called social emotions, right? This idea of feeling connected and appreciated at work, as opposed to things like determined and focused and inspired. So conceptually, they're different. And the research played that out. So the analyses show that they were really distinguishable. Not uncorrelated, which I'm going to get to in a minute, but distinguishable in terms of factors. Yeah?
I wonder if for this group it's not exhausting to have to be so determined all the time because you're trying to bring people along.
Yeah. So you bring up a really good point. I published a paper about 3 years ago on this, which was that we tend to think of like being engaged and inspired as being inversely correlated with burnout. But what I found in profile analysis, which I'm going to get to in a minute, is that about 20% of the workplace, this was a big sample of 14,000 people across the United States in the workforce, about 20% of the workforce is very high in engagement and very high in burnout. And so those are the people you really have to look out for, because they, on the surface, they look like great, but they're on, LinkedIn looking for another job. All right, we're going to keep going, and we can talk about this when Mel and I go on stage in a little bit. Now, I wanted to get to the whys. Somebody, the man back there, asked that question a little while ago. Now, I wasn't able to create scales and administer the scales. 5 minutes. Well, we're cutting our time together short. You made me start late. What? Thank you very much. You're very kind. I like my workplace better now. Now, these are the, so the way we did this was we asked you to use an open-ended way. Describe in your own words the things about your workplace that bring you the sense of joy and inspiration and connection versus not. And so these were your 5 areas. And these are the impediments, the impediments. So number 1, and these are ranked, by the way, in terms of frequencies. So the top one was leaders who don't understand or show empathy, which is interesting. The second one was just the time pressure and the work demand, organizational culture and bureaucracy, lack of resources and support, and kind of team dynamics and conflict. So again, what this is saying is that, and I want to give you an example from another study of how these go together. But right now, just saying these were your top areas. And we'll talk about this later. I won't do the activity for this one. Now, the top sources of joy, the things that bring you, which is something we don't talk enough about. We're always talking about the things that make us hate our jobs, but like asking yourself, like, what brings me joy? What makes me have pleasant emotions? Number 1, helping others and supporting other people's growth. Number 2, rewarding colleague and staff relationships, personal and professional success. Feeling like you have impact and having the ability to kind of like be creative in problem solving. So again, it's not always about finding ways to decrease the things that make you feel unwell, but it's about spending time on the things that help you to have greater well-being. And this appears to be, at least in this group, the factors that contribute to that. So you might, it's good questions, because you might ask yourself, how often do I experience these things in my workplace? It's like, I live in the countryside of Connecticut now. I love hiking. I love being outdoors. And I think I took 1 hike this year. Right? So it's like I know what brings me joy, but I don't do it. It's the weirdest thing in the world. Now, we'll do that later. Oops. So to wrap up, I got about 8 more minutes. I wanted to just show you the very messy table here. But to show you that these are the scales that we just went through, broken down into the pleasant emotions and then the unpleasant emotions. But I want you to see for joy, right? Like joy and hope, all the positive ones do connect, but they're not 100% negatively correlated. Meaning, so for those of you who don't understand, just to explain correlations, a correlation goes from -1 to +1. A -1 means like it's perfectly negatively correlated. A positive correlation of +1 means that like my two arms here, if you measured, they're probably 0.95, but they're pretty similar on most of us. So it's not that when you're feeling joy that you don't feel anger. Like it's only 0.58 correlation. And I think it's an important thing in research and in psychology to show people that we are complex human beings. It's not that we're just feeling pleasant, not pleasant. We can be simultaneously feeling anger and joy. We can be both exhausted and inspired. I feel that way all the time. I love what I do. I love that I have new data to talk about. It makes me inspired. I'm also really tired. Last I was doing a talk in New Hampshire the day. I didn't realize it was longer than I had. I got a car service thing to bring me there, but I got there. It was just like bed and breakfast that was like really like, I was like, I think I've moved beyond this in my career. And I didn't want to be as snobby about it, but I was like, this is a shithole. And so like I was angry with myself. Why did I accept this? I was all that determination coupled with annoyance. So everyone see that? These are not so clearly delineated. Now, this is not your data, but I wanted to share this with you because this is the more complex analysis where we look at the relationships between the emotion scales and the factors, meaning the sources. And so the sources this is now in my education work. So student relationships is either a source of pleasure or displeasure for people, right? In this particular school, it correlates with pride and feeling contentment, but not so much. Student performance, that's a factor that seems to be really affecting the well-being of teachers. Leadership, this one was a big trigger. When I showed these data to the principal, she was upset. She's like a 0.5 correlation between feeling their relationship with me as a leader and them feeling like they're included in my school. Like, yikes. That means there's a lot of people that don't feel included. And we were about to go into a meeting with her entire staff, and I said, Dina, are you willing to go public with these data? And she's like, Mark, if I don't go public, like this is the work. Like if I don't have a transparent conversation with my team about why there's this big distribution of feelings of inclusion and how that's related to my leadership, how am I ever going to change? But that takes emotional intelligence to do that. Now notice there are other things here, but the big factor here in her school, which was really interesting and unexpected, was that this idea of being your true self, which is something that I've been very interested in, like, can I be who I am in my school or in my workplace? That was the strongest detractor or enhancer of people's well-being. And whether or not we feel we're doing authentic work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. So that ended up having, I can't go into the details because it's confidential, very, very kind of like intense conversation between the leadership, me as the coach, and the team. Ended up going really well, but it needed to be facilitated really well. And this is why you can't do this work without emotional intelligence, because it's all feeling. Everybody's activated when when they're seeing this, and people have to change, and people have to take ownership. And sometimes it's about the leader, but sometimes we have this conversation, like the leader says, like, I'm going to do everything I can, but like if you never tell me anything, how will I ever know? We had to wait till Marc did a survey work for me to really learn about these feelings. How come if you were feeling this way, you didn't feel safe and comfortable to come to me? What do I need to do more to help you feel safe and comfortable to have these conversations with me? So another thing that you can do is profiling. And profiling in this instance is really looking at in your organization, like what happens when there are people with low emotional well-being, but high social and high workplace, or, the other profiles. And that can get really kind of more and more interesting. is getting at the profile analysis. Imagine a place where people, yes, they feel well emotionally, they have good relationships, but they're not motivated and inspired or determined about their work. So what does that do to help you focus your intervention work? Finally, we're here at a mindfulness conference, so we brought in the 5-factor mindfulness questionnaire, which is just, you may know that already, it's just different scales around your mindfulness practices. And what we looked at was the correlation between your mindfulness practices and your leadership styles, as well as your kind of burnout and exhaustion and turnover intentions. And as you can see here, people with higher scores in terms of their mindfulness practices, showed up as stronger in these leadership practices, but also were less exhausted. So the mindfulness does look like a protective factor for burnout. It does look like it increases your job satisfaction, your non-likelihood to want to transition, your purpose and meaning, having less compassion fatigue, experiencing more pleasant and unpleasant emotions. So the scale that I created, you can collapse it into 2 scales too. So all those little 18 ones, or 2 separate ones, just general positive and general negative. And then the mindful leadership scales. And I'll make these available, and we can talk about them in greater detail with Mo. Also, we looked at just pulling out the positive and negative emotions. I thought it was really interesting to show you that positive emotions, for example, have a stronger impact. See this, like a 0.25 versus a 0.47, that is significantly different. So what it's saying is that experiencing more positive emotions is much more highly related to transformational leadership than experiencing unpleasant emotions. Same thing going down here. If you look at compassion fatigue, right? The absence of negative emotions is stronger than the presence of positive emotions. This is a little bit more complex. You need to sit with this. So maybe we can talk, Mo and I can talk about this later on. But interesting findings to me, where job satisfaction, look at that, was equal, right? Your positive and your negative emotions equally were predictive of your job satisfaction. All right, last 2 slides and I'm done. Wanted to share with you in my other research, which is longitudinal research. Couldn't do that here because this is a one-shot study. I've shown over the course of 3 years of the pandemic that in school systems where there's a leader with higher emotional intelligence, there are teachers who are more satisfied in their jobs, are more accomplished, are less likely to leave their jobs, experience greater and fewer positive emotions, have better mental health, and actually sleep better. So that the skill of that leader is really playing out in terms of having predictive validity about the well-being and even the sleep quality, of the employees in that organization. And so just a few resources to wrap up. One is, I was here last year and I shared this app that I built. It's called How We Feel. This is built with my colleague who is the co-founder of Pinterest, Ben Silverman, and I, and our teams. We have 1.5 million people using the app now. It is available for free forever on Android and iOS. And we're adding features, including an AI feature for yourself to analyze your data to help you, create reports for you to give you guidance around what strategies might be helpful or not to your well-being. So please check that out. I also, since coming here last year, started this new web series. I call it Dealing with Feelings. And I interview some of the world's most interesting people, like researchers like Angela Duckworth, singers like the singer Jewel, Dr. Alfie, who studies Black mental health, Duff McKagan, who is a well-known researcher from Guns N' Roses. That was a joke, by the way. Anyway, that's Sophie Trudeau, the First Lady of Canada, and another friend of mine, Ethan Cross, who studies emotion regulation. So I've got more guests coming on. Then my next guests include John Haidt, who you may know from The Anxious Generation, and others. So please check that out. You all know Mo mentioned my book, so you can certainly take a look at that. Actually, starting on Monday, if you really want to go deep, I'm doing a book club that's free online. So people just join and they come on, and we have rich conversations and participate in research too. And finally, last slide. Let's just put it all together. Well-being is multifaceted. Pleasant and unpleasant experiences are not necessarily inversely related. I think correlating well-being are the sources of well-being. That slide that I shared with you about that one school, which would be the next step in this research. like taking all those ideas that you came up with in terms of the sources, making scales out of that, having reliability in terms of the scale development, and then in your organization, what you would do is administer the sources as well as the well-being to show that matrix, to look at the areas, like in that particular environment. A lot of it had to do with that being my true self and DEI. And so that's the you can't do everything. And so what I think data helps you do is make the best choices about where you want to go in terms of supporting your faculty and staff. And on that note, thank you.